We'll get started immediately. Just since I'm a Chicago Kent professor, let me welcome you to Chicago Kent. We have an excellent panel. I mean, the topic, why don't we defend better, seems singularly appropriate after the keynote. Jenifer Inserro is our first speaker, Senior Director of IT and Security Policy at Blue Cross. If Jenna would tell them your topic and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm Jenny Inserro. I work for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Montana, so we're not all related. But I'll say that's even an issue, right? Because how many of you guys heard of the Anthem breach a few years ago? Everybody thought it was Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? I was even sitting at home watching the news, and they're like, Blue Cross Blue Shield had a breach. Well, we're not all related, although we are related. So it actually did affect us, even though we didn't cause it. So I think that's something, that obviously we're all aware of, that our organizations are not standalone. They're not silos. So things that happen to, and I think Joe did a great job of saying that about our supply chain or our partners, things that happen to them happen to us. So that's definitely something to be aware of. I think when we were planning for this panel, Ricardo and we both came to the conclusion that hygiene is really important. And I know he's going to talk about that too. But I think one of the reasons why we don't address things is, first of all, I think a lot of people are dealing with a lot of priorities. And when they're dealing with a lot of priorities, they take shortcuts. And when they take shortcuts, things happen. And so I think one of the things we continue to stress at our organization is prioritization of the work, not just for the security people. I'm talking about for our IT partners and our business partners, because if they're dealing with competing priorities, multiple priorities, sometimes being diligent about security gets lost in the shuffle. So I think that's one thing that we really want to consider. Why are we still talking about patching, lack of patching, when it's 2019? Because again, it's the thing that gets lost in the shuffle. Why are we still talking about keeping old data around that we shouldn't be keeping in 2019? Because it's not something that people are actively dealing with, right? They want to go do the new cool thing. And so I think there's a lot to be said for basic, think about it in your own personal life, right? If you don't practice hygiene, things are going to start falling apart on you. If you don't exercise your capabilities, things are going to start falling apart on you. It's no different in security. If we don't practice the good hygiene, so if you're not brushing your teeth at home, you're not patching at work, things are going to start to go south, right? But I think what happens is, and don't get me wrong, I love vendors. They come out with great products. But the vendors are coming along saying, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to have this product. And the problem is we're not taking time to really look at what we have, fine-tune those products, make sure that we're getting maximum capability out of them. And then we kind of lose sight of these like not so cool things over here. So I really feel like there's a lot to be said for hygiene, but then also exercising. Are we looking at our response capabilities? It shouldn't take 12 hours for someone to let us know they had a breach when our data is affected. We should know our capabilities if something happens. We should be practicing our disaster recovery. We should be doing all those things. So again, like I said, equating it to your personal life, you need to exercise to stay fit. Security, we need to exercise to stay fit. You need to practice good hygiene to be healthy. If you're not doing that in your security program, same thing, things start to fall apart. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in that space. Third piece I'll go into is the partnership around our end users. So I think a lot of times we treat security awareness like something we have to do. We have to tell end users what to do with their passwords. We have to do these things. Again, it's really about shifting their mindset and their behavior so that they are part of the solution. So how are you positioning your program to help people understand their part in the equation of good security? Are you helping them understand how to behave appropriately? Are you giving them the tools to be able to do it? Are you making processes so cumbersome that they will go around them? So I think there's a lot to be said, again, about how you shift that mindset from, oh man, this is security training, I have to take it, my company is making me do it, to this is part of my job. This is what I do. I'm here to protect my company, even though I work in marketing, finance, HR, whatever it is. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. And then the fourth piece I'll say, and then turn it over to my colleagues here, is it is about risk. And so if we as security people are not educating our business partners on the risk and allowing them to make informed decisions, we're not doing our jobs. If we're just scaring them with data or we're not giving them the information they need, we're not doing our jobs. And I think sometimes what gets lost in the shuffle is we don't think they'll understand, or we don't know ourselves, right? Sometimes we have to admit maybe the data that we need to be able to tell the story is not something easy for us to get. And so we have to work on that. But our job is to help educate our business partners so they can make informed decisions. Our CISO has a nice line. He says, I never tell anyone no. He says, you can do that, but here's what will happen. So, I think we have to tell that story about here's what will happen if you make that decision. And it's a big responsibility. I was having a conversation with someone right before this. We were talking about, risk and how it is our job as security professionals, especially security leaders, to help educate people on the risks that they're taking. This vendor, you may want to use this vendor. You may have really good reasons for using this vendor. But guess what? I'm going to show you some of the issues there so you understand what we need to do to get this vendor to be up to par with what we need in terms of security, so that when we use them, you're not dumbstruck later on by the fact that this vendor just caused a big breach. So I think there's a lot of work we have to do in educating and partnering. And in order for us to do that, we have to take an active interest in and understand the business that they're in as well. We can't just come at it like, you guys have to be security experts. We need to share our knowledge, but we also need to understand the perspective that they're coming from.
Thanks a lot. Since Ricardo is going to talk about hygiene too, let's turn it over to you.
Hello, Ricardo Lafosse, CISO for Morningstar. That's why I had my colleague here go first, made it easier so I can just say what she said. That's how I roll. Anyways, security is hard. It's very difficult. There's a lot of moving pieces to a security organization, not just patch management, cyber hygiene, so on and so forth. A lot of it has to deal with the people aspect of information security and how you work with other business partners. But as it comes down to cyber hygiene, what really is important is the relationship you have with the lower level engineers or the people that are actually doing the remediation work for you. I've been in very few shops where security engineers actually go into a system and patching the systems. It's very rare with having that. So building those relationships with the IT management to ensure that, hey, this is a collaborative effort that will help you identify. We'll even create scripts for you, but have that partnership to ensure that you can have proper penetration across your organization. And it's not throwing something over the fence. And I will say that I am very guilty of that as well. I want to hurry up and get to my next task. I'll delegate to one of my engineers and say, all right, you figure this out and I need it done by 1 p.m. So I'm very guilty of that, and that breeds inefficiencies, and that also causes issues and friction amongst the teams. I am known as a friction-full person, but I like to really push frictionless environments when you're working with different colleagues. One thing from a cyber hygiene perspective that we found to be effective is to modularize your program. Have one of your engineers work on just the networking piece. Have them work on the server piece. Have them work on the application piece. If you think you're going to patch and have your AV signatures up to date across the entire org and have it as one monolithic program, you're going to fail. And half the time, you don't even know where all your assets are. All right, since you guys were fun and actually raised your hands with the previous individual, who here knows where all their assets are right now? Damn, I really want to walk up there and shake your hand. It's a very difficult process, specifically with the integration of cloud and mobile technologies and IoT. Everything shifts. So we did a major transformation, I want to say about 2 years ago, to move to the cloud, where IP addresses are completely useless. It's very ephemeral. Everything comes up, comes down, disappears, now is in Asia, and tomorrow might be in Australia. So having those type of environments and being able to keep with those trends that your business is running at, and knowing 2 steps ahead of where they're moving, ensure that you can pivot your program to those new business processes are really important to ensure that you're keeping track of where your major risks are, and we'll just pivot that into risk management. Risk management is the key foundation to ensure that you can complete your objectives. If your objective is patch 80% of my network devices, but you only know where 20% of them are, you need to ensure that you have that visibility and work towards that visibility. Have dedicated modular pieces. I'll keep on saying modular because everyone tackles this as a big program. Make sure those small wins help you incrementally move the needle of your program, but also helps with the morale of your employees. If you have a project on your roadmap for 8 months that says patch networks and you've made very little progress, it doesn't just hurt your overall program, it really hurts the morale of your employees. And my last thing I'll leave you with is automation. Automation's the best way you're going to get out of the hole. With automation, you can have your skilled engineers actually work on project-based work or step back and have more of that strategic view and architecture view instead of sitting there working with server engineers to ensure that the latest Java patch isn't breaking production. You want to move away from that and have those rudimentary steps automated, either through scripts by third parties, so on and so forth. So automation's your friend. You don't have to be an intense super scripter. You just need to know what you're trying to achieve. And I almost guarantee you there's someone in your organization that can help you get to the next steps of automation.
Thank you. I should have mentioned we're saving audience questions and back and forth for the panel till the end. So with that, let's turn to Chris Williams from Convex Legal. I got it, Chris Williams down here.
Told you we didn't prepare.
So we did. So, oh. We don't have, oh, no, we don't have Dave. Dave. It's here. I swear to you. Dave Melchers.
Hi, I'm Dave. So my background is as a CIO at a couple of companies and then at Gartner, leading the executive programs for practice in the Americas. Most recently, I was the Americas leader there. So my interactions have been more at the executive level. I'd like to amplify the point around prioritization and communication. So complexity and sprawl are the enemies of effective focus. The frameworks that are provided for security, ISO 27001, NIST, COBIT, et cetera, are good. They're very good. Their focus is really on how do you tackle risk. Most companies, most leaders struggle with how do I prioritize, where am I going to focus my time and attention. So my amplification point would be around whatever you can do, whether you're helping organizations or within organizations in leadership roles, to step back from the complexity, to do an effective rubric around prioritization of what you should focus on, and as much as possible to connect that to the business priorities. That, for me, is a key to successful defense.
Okay, so my background is mostly in decentralized systems. I've been working in this almost 7 years now, and I agree with both of you that hygiene is important and is currently, from a business perspective, I guess, the appropriate remedy. I'm just not sure if it's going to be enough once we connect 50 billion devices over the internet. And companies like Cisco and IBM, they've started to buy startups who are involved with decentralized authentication protocols. So this whole idea that centralized points of failure are the permanent problem, and that decentralized approaches could perhaps over time provide certain solutions. I personally believe that there's no way around it. The problem is we don't have the infrastructure for that on the decentralized side. There may be people in the city and in Silicon Valley who are talking up decentralized infrastructure solutions. Unfortunately, I've been in this, as I said, almost 7 years. They're just not around. We don't have those solutions at this point. So whatever these companies are buying, they're just little chinks in the armor, if you want. And unless you put that armor together by creating these infrastructure solutions, I'm a little doubtful at this point. So hygiene for now, yes. So let me siphon off, move into a little bit of a different scenario. So decentralized solutions have two perspectives right now. There's the now and there's the future of what could be with decentralized authentication protocols. What we have right now is decentralized solutions actually exacerbating the problem. Why? Many of you will have read in the Wall Street Journal and other public outlets that these hackers from unknown countries are able to shut down hospitals, government units, and so forth. through various means. And it's extremely cheap. Anybody in this room, and I'm not advocating this, if you have zero knowledge, if you don't know how to find basic information about denial of service attacks, if you don't know how to deal with YouTube channels that will teach you all of this, you can hire somebody, $5,000, no problem, on the internet. Take care of it, inflict damage. Yeah? So the cost of inflicting damage for anybody, uneducated people who don't barely know how to turn on a computer, you can do it. And that's getting worse and worse and worse. So what do these people do with decentralized technology? Well, the insurance companies, they're looking at this and they can't touch Bitcoin. But the ransom that's demanded by these hackers who shut down hospitals is they say, pay us $500,000 in Bitcoin by X time and we will release the problem and allow you to fix the problem. Yeah? So the insurance companies are now saying it's cheaper for us to pay these people, but we can't touch Bitcoin because from a regulatory perspective, they are not allowed. They can't engage with it. So what do? They hire people, companies that are specializing in this right now, who pay off these ransoms with Bitcoin. What happens if the insurance companies are paying off in Bitcoin? It creates a negative feedback loop, right? So if you know you can shut a hospital down and get paid in Bitcoin, and it can be traced, let's not kid ourselves, that it can also be traced, it's just too expensive to trace it. Yeah? You're creating a negative feedback, meaning you have more and more incentives for hackers in these countries to create, quote unquote, create solutions and getting paid off like that. And that, to me, that's one of the major problems. We've seen it become more and more common. I typically don't ask for regulatory intervention, but that negative feedback loop is so powerful right now that at some point, that business that's being created in paying people off with Bitcoin has to be shut down, in my opinion. We can't even understand what the ramifications may be. Sorry, I talk too much. I'll be quiet now.
I'd like to jump in on that real quick. So I agree that is a definite issue, but let's go to the root cause, and I will fight and fall on this patching sword. How was ransomware pushed out? Specifically, the latest, the one that destroyed the UK hospital. I don't know what, a missing patch. It goes back to the root cause. No, and I agree. The decentralized does make it a lot harder. You can't patch anything, but it goes back to your risk profile. You know where your crown jewels are. Your EMR system are your crown jewels that runs your hospital. Ensure that you at least prioritize the patches on that. Make sure the proper configuration. Know the ins and outs of those critical systems.
So, oh, sorry.
No, I told you.
So why doesn't that happen?
Not enough resources, overworked personnel. It goes back to the people problem. If you have 50 billion devices to patch, how can you need someone to prioritize those patches. You need to understand where your critical assets are, and you need to be able to prioritize that over all your business objectives. Your business leaders want to go live next week. Are you going to patch your crown jewels, or are you going to ensure the business can go market next week?
Yeah. Since I've got 4 people with real jobs on the panel, and as opposed to the academic here, let me tell you what academics think, and then I want to know if it's right. We think you have a communication problem in part, right? The IT people and the C-level executives have a hard time talking about the same language. The lawyers have the same problem, and nobody understands the lawyers, right? So it's difficult to organize an effective patching campaign if the C-level people that have to make the decision don't understand why they have to do it, and if the lawyers can't explain what's at stake, right? So the reason I ask is in the academia we think we have the task of forging a common language. So I just wondered if that made any real sense.
I completely agree. It's a collective action problem, right? It should be all R&D. The companies shouldn't be pushing it down to the vendors and saying, oh, we're externalizing risk, we're going to pay you off, you take care of the problem. That's only a temporary patch. And as we know with any dam, the water comes out on the edges, right? So it should be R&D, but how do you coordinate cybersecurity risk mitigation R&D? It's yeah, you don't, exactly.
No, I was just going to say, I think to your earlier question, though, we have a lot of data to share with senior leadership and business leaders about companies, competitors that have had issues because of basic hygiene issues. So we don't have to tell the story in terms of the technology. We need to tell it in terms of look over here and see what happened to this guy. Look over here and see what happened to this guy. It's all related to the same issue. And I think we're not good at telling those stories. We want to go in there and ask for money to get the newest, latest thing. And I think that's part of the issue. So when they see us coming, they're like, oh, here's the security people. They're going to come ask for $20 million again for the latest, greatest thing. We need to show them like, hey, we're committed to not only doing new things and looking at how we prevent new threats and dealing with new technologies, but we're also still on top of what you already entrusted us with. And we have these examples of why we have to keep on top of that.
We're going to have to bring it to a close because we'll be back on schedule and there's a break coming up. So thank the panel very much.
Thank you.